Hello and welcome to BRAIDAR, the business of beauty. So this is our first episode of 2024. I hope you guys had a great winter break, lots of rest, lots of food, lots of hanging out with family and friends. And so yeah, today, as you might have seen online, posted it a bit earlier, but we're going to talk about basically the vision behind BRAIDAR as a company, and we're going to draw on themes from Americanah, which is a novel by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. It's very good, would recommend. And also going to touch on some tips for taking care of your natural hair while you're at college or at uni or just basically away from home and away from like your normal products. So, yeah, without further ado, just going to hop right into that. So, last year, during the first episode, we talked about the the importance of braids in terms of their cultural significance and in terms of what they mean for various communities, not just like one specific nationality, but in terms of, I think, reaching across like national sort of bounds and reaching across even like regional bounds to for people to find commonality and find a sense of like being welcome and being like feeling like they belong basically in a space, because I talked about how even if you're someone for example, from Nigeria and you see someone else in your uni who has braids, they might not necessarily be from Nigeria as well, but then that sort of signifier immediately communicates something to you and connotes like something that just, I don't know, it just lets you know that there's more people like you in this space and that there's infrastructure and facilities and different services that accommodate your unique like cultural needs or wants or ways of expression. So that was a really interesting episode and really nice to like dive into. But I think right now what will kind of be the focus is more so how Bradar like fits into that. And I talked about that in that same episode. I talked about how Bradar's focus is to leverage the student community in a city or in a town to really provide that, like whether it's braiding service or like wig fitting and customizing service for other students who want those services done. And I think it's a really sort of key issue because there's something there's something quite dynamic about a population where you have this sort of bank of talent or like a desire for people to like experiment with different hairstyles and different extensions and different patterns and trends and things like that. And then on the other hand, in the same community, you have people who are really, really, really eager and like excited to try those and like get those done for themselves. But then in that like disconnect, there's a lot of opportunity for people to kind of, I guess, brainstorm how we can sort of bridge that gap and bring these two sides together. So Bradar is really a platform where there's two sort of client bases, I suppose you could say. There's the stylists, and those would be like the braiders or the nail techs or the lash techs or any kind of beauty service that you're like rendering and that you're practicing. And then the other client base is the actual clients for those like stylists. So Bradar is really trying to create a space where both sides can feel sort of at home, feel free, and really feel like catered to in terms of whatever specific style you're looking for, whatever your like geographic like radius in which you're willing to travel to get this style done or to get the particular lash extensions like installed. Whatever your kind of specifications, Bradar is there to kind of facilitate that. And so it's just a matter of, on the client side, you just inputting whatever your specifications are, whether it's, I want knotless braids in color 30, I'm in this area and I've got a 25-minute like radius limit to where I'm willing to go to get the style done. And then Bradar does all the kind of hard work and the number crunching for you to find the best stylist for your specific set of specifications. And then on the stylist side, what BRAIDAR really does is like it helps to aggregate the customers that you're looking for, or even your existing customers. It just streamlines the whole process of like initiating a booking request on that's when the clients initiate a booking request, or when the clients want to exchange details and just get confirmation on whether it's like the address or the price. It just really standardizes the whole process and saves you time and energy, particularly. And also, what BRAIDAR does is it provides a platform for you to actually showcase your work. Because I know a lot of people have Instagram accounts and a lot of people even have their own websites. But the problem is that these, for example, Instagram as a site, as a platform, it's not necessarily optimized for discovery, especially like location-based discovery. I think it's because their search function is just not, it's not like specific enough. Even if you were to type in, let's say, Aberdeen braider, the results that come up are not a comprehensive list of the Aberdeen braiders. And if your account doesn't have those like keywords in it, then it's not going to get picked up by the search results and like the inbuilt Instagram search engine. So you can just imagine how many potential customers who would, if they saw your account, would want to book you in a heartbeat. But because there's that layer of like obscuring and a layer of just indirectness on on Instagram that just makes it a bit difficult, especially for small kind of side hustle style businesses. Although it's really good for like the visual side, because as we know, Instagram is all about like the visual, or even like in the case of the reels, like audio as well, and like the interplay of the two. So yeah, what BRAIDAR wants to do is to bring that element of showcasing your skills and what you know how to do and where you are, and just your whole, I guess your whole enterprise in a sense, like your whatever kind of vibe your side hustle has. BRAIDAR is like a platform for you to really creatively like present yourself in front of like a warm audience, so to speak. So yeah, and I guess the vision behind why that is so necessary is also echoed in Americanah. So even on like I believe the first page of the novel, it dives into the fact that Ifemelu can't get braids done in her university town, and she has to go on the train to another place to find like braiders. And I think that whole sort of disconnect between your immediate sort of university life or academic life or social life, and then the hurdles that you have to like surmount in order to engage with this very like integral part of your identity. I think that that is a kind of dissonance that a lot of Black students have to deal with, and that is dealt with begrudgingly. So it's not necessarily something that it's not necessarily that people enjoy going on long, like hours long journeys to get their hair done, but it's more so there's 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 a lack of awareness about other options. Yeah, I think that's the best way to describe it. Yeah. And I think I think the fact that it's it's such a sort of salient issue is maybe also very well summed up in the fact that last year I was talking to someone about BRAIDAR and just the idea behind it, and what it, like I aim for it to do, and what it could do to help people in like our St. Andrews community and in Dundee and other like smaller university cities and towns. And the person said, "Oh, have you read Americanah?" Because that's exactly like what Ifemelu's has to contend with and deals with, and like the whole motif of hair as an extension of self, and as a sort of conduit through which you like people filter their perceptions of you, and through which you kind of, you know, hair situated in this larger framework of society and your place in society as, like in the example of Ifemelu, a Black woman, and yeah, all these intricacies. And so that's really what drew me to reading Americana this sort of semester. And I thought I would share the sort of overlap between that and BRAIDAR. And so, yeah, in in general, what I would really hope for BRAIDAR is that it becomes a sort of hub for people who, even if people don't necessarily want to start a fully sort of fledged and kitted out and, with business cards and everything, that type of side hustle, even if someone just says, look, I can do mini twists on the weekends, I'd like to make some extra money or just at least have, get something going, that BRAIDAR would be a place for someone like that to post their, whether it's like their past work, the hair of their past clients, or even just to kind of put themselves, even if you don't have any past clients to show, and then they'd be able to engage with not just like their hobby or their sort of skill base in like a physical way, like the actual practice of braiding, but also to engage with other people within like the Black community in St. Andrews or in Dundee, for example. So it's a way of kind of connecting people, but using hair and using culture and using beauty and fashion as a sort of common ground to start that friendship and that dialogue going. So yeah, I think that would be a really invaluable thing, especially in universities that aren't in huge cities or that don't have like a sizable Black population in the towns or the cities where they're located. So yeah. And I guess a bit of an update. You might have already seen it online, but we were conducting beta testing throughout most of last semester, actually. And it was really, really eye-opening to hear from a lot of prospective users and prospective like clients and stylists, and just to get people's feedback on, I guess, the specifics of how the site would work, but even more generally, just to hear the kind of like encouragement and the kind of anticipation and excitement around something like this that could potentially solve like a really major pain point for a lot of like Black students or even international students, like as a like group within the larger, like, I guess, BAME sort of community. So yeah, on that in that same vein, I thought it would also be nice to branch into like some tips that I've sort of accumulated along the way of having studied in St. Andrews for 4 years and having just navigated that whole like, okay, like your family or your house is like based in one location and then you study in somewhere else, and obviously that comes with like certain styling fallbacks or products or practices that you can kind of count on being around you at home. They may not be around you while you're studying. So I thought it would be very useful for me to just go over some in a very like relaxed, very chilled way. And yeah, hopefully it will help someone, whether you're an international student listening or whether you're just curious, or even if you're someone who's not yet started university but just wants to be aware of certain things. So I'd say, and these are sort of tailored to natural hair more so because that's like the kind of hair that I'm most used to nowadays, although I know a bit about like transitioning hair and relaxed hair as well. So I could potentially do another iteration of this on like on those like areas as well, if that's what you guys want. Just let me know online, find us on Instagram or Facebook, and you can kind of put your suggestions there. So yeah, I'd say to start off with, one thing that a lot of people find like a you know when you come up against a wall, that that kind of phenomena when there's something very, very different about the way that natural hair behaves, and like, and by extension that you have to take care of it in the winter. So basically when people give you advice about like studying abroad, or when people even want to, even in general, like if you haven't left your town or your city or your country for uni, people always say that in the winter you got to make sure that your natural hair is moisturized. And I think that that's sound advice, but I also think that often people are left with like, okay, I know the importance of it, but I don't know exactly how, like, where do I even start? Where, like what do I do? Like, what exactly do you mean? And I think especially for people who, again, are used to having like braiders down the street, or like in Lagos, for example, like like I often sort of joke that the way that cafes are so like ubiquitous in St. Andrews is how like wig shops and braiding salons are in Lagos, especially in Lekki. So, you can imagine coming here is quite different. You kind of have to do a lot more research work and a lot more prep work to find the actual braiders in the first place before you can even talk about like what style am I going to do, where am I going to get the products to do the style, where am I going to get the extensions, like when in the semester do I have enough time between deadlines. So you can kind of see where Braidar could really help in this whole exchange. But I guess the point of this particular tip now is when, I guess, moisture in general, especially in terms of like natural hair or any hair that kind of feels like it doesn't retain moisture, or that you feel like it gets dry easily, it's more so about keeping a sense like of moisture in the hair. So you know how, let's say, when you drench your hair in the shower, or you mist it with like a spray bottle, you know how it feels, and you're like, if only it could like stay like this, then I wouldn't have so many issues with like breakage, or I wouldn't sort of be at a loss of like how to style it and things like that. I think that sort that sort of like line of thought is, it's almost parallel with like what retaining moisture is trying to do. But I think the crucial thing is to not like fight what your hair does naturally, because I think, again, it's all sort of interlinked. But in wanting to keep your hair moisturized, I think it's also important to recognize that your hair may not, like, your moisturizer might not look like someone else's. So don't put undue pressure on yourself. But if you do feel like you notice, oh, my hair's a bit different, it's not really like responding the same way, it's kind of breaking a lot, then I would then say, like, to launch into my tip, that retaining the moisture should start with wash day. So, like, as I said before, like, whether you've just drenched your hair and you've like finished deep conditioning, or you've like sprayed it with a spray bottle, that sort of state that your hair's in is like saturated with water, or it should be saturated. And then the goal is, when you use products, it's not like you should use products when all that, like, you know how the hair feels like very supple and like pliable when it's wet. It's not like you should use products when that feeling is completely gone. It's not like when it's stopped feeling like that, then you put the products and then it should feel like that again. It's more so like retaining and like sealing in that feeling of like when you drenched it, if that makes sense. And this could look different for different people. Like, for example, for a lot of people, they sort of let their hair dry maybe 50%. So that would be like, it's not dripping on your clothes and on your floor, but if you like touch it and if you tap it, especially like the middle of your hair, it still feels like there's still water that comes off on your fingers. So what you want to do when your hair is kind of in that state, again, this is just like a general sort of thing that works for a lot of people, but it may not work for your hair, and I'll come to that later. But what you want to do when your hair's in that state is that you want to then seal it, like seal the water with something. So that's when your products will come into play, whether it's like your leave-in conditioner, whether it's your like oil, like argan oil or castor oil. That's when you need to use it. And I know it feels a bit weird. You're like, well, my hair feels fine, so it's like it's been accomplished. The goal's been accomplished. But it's sort of it's kind of hard to preempt, or to like recognize when your hair is going to like lose all that moisture, which is why you kind of have to seal it and put the products on when it's in that like optimally moisturized state. And I think, yeah, just trying to maintain that state is then what allows your hair to like quote unquote be moisturized. So it's not necessarily like, if I use this product and wash it off and then, you know, let my hair dry and then put a leave-in and just do that as part of my routine, then my hair will become moisturized. It's more so like trying to maintain like the instant that it gets moisturized. It's trying to like seal that and like prolong that, So I hope that kind of makes sense in a way, because again, a lot of people know about the like LOC method, which is when you want to moisturize your hair and you use like a liquid or a leave-in. So that could be water, or it could be like a liquid sort of leave-in conditioner, and you use like an oil. Again, it could be argan, castor, coconut, olive, and then you use a cream. So it could be like whipped shea butter. It could be like a leave-in cream, or like a, there's creams that say like 3-in-1 leave-in, deep conditioner, and detangler. You could use that. And then what that's doing, it's like it's keeping the suppleness and the flexibility of the hair by making sure the water doesn't evaporate, essentially. So it's not necessarily like those products that make it moisturize. Yeah. So I guess that's the overall like gist of that tip. And I think that's something that I'm coming to realize lately, especially with trying different like regimens and methods out, now that my hair's like, I'm just having it out for a while just to try out things before I go back to braids, because I think that's just like the optimum state of being while at uni. Would definitely recommend like getting braids done so you don't have to like wake up earlier to do your hair and then go to class, or like just keep on having to do things before you can get to like the pressing things of like your deadlines. Or if you're in halls, like there's a set breakfast hour. You don't want to miss breakfast because you have to style your hair before you can leave the room, like all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it's definitely very useful to explore styles, or rather like processes that will allow you to do the least detangling. And that's why braids are so good, because if you have braids, you can keep them in for like however long, not however long you want, but within a certain bound of like a couple months, you can essentially like customize how long you're going without having to detangle your hair. And I think that in that there's a lot of freedom and a lot of flexibility, because you can customize like the texture of the extensions that you use if you use extensions, but then you can also customize like your lifestyle around that freedom that the extensions give you. So there's like a multi-layered sort of dynamic there. But yeah, the main thing about why braids are also really good for length retention is that you're not having to like comb through your hair every night. Even if you follow a regimen that's like you twist it, before you go to bed, or you twist it every like 3 days, for example, there's still in that twisting process a bit of manipulation and a bit of like, whether you respray it, or you have to like comb through and then twist it round, or you have to like comb out the ends of your hair. There's still some like mechanical sort of manipulation that you're doing to the hair strands that can like result in breakage. And yeah, so any process or style that can minimize those sessions of having to like comb through the hair, or sessions of having to um like twist it, turn it, like pull it up, down, whatever, those are the kind of things that you want to lean into more on a long-term basis. And it's not to say that you can't do styles that require you to manipulate your hair, but I'd say if you're looking to just sort of retain like length and retain the if you're looking to grow out your hair, and also if you're looking to not be sort of not shape your lifestyle around the hair schedule, then I would definitely recommend like low manipulation styles. I would definitely recommend like protective styling, like long-term protective styling, whether that's with extensions or without, like could be mini braids or mini twists, for example. Yeah, I would definitely recommend those. Like, for example, personally, right now I'm trying out something different. I did mostly braids and then mini twists, kind of like alternating for the past maybe just over 2 years. And that worked really well in terms of length retention. But I noticed that with the mini twists, maybe it's again how I'm doing it because I'm still learning as well how to do them, to install them, that is. But I would get a lot of tangling that would almost negate the benefits of, having your hair up in a protective style for that amount of time. And it wasn't even like I was keeping it in for too long. This could be like I kept it in for a week, and then the detangling process was like as if I'd done like proper like extensions braids. Like you guys know what I mean by that, when there's like you comb out the braid, and then there's you have to also like work through the knots that at the base of the, you guys know what I'm talking about. So I was like, if I'm getting this situation with mini twists, maybe it's not gonna work out, for me in this time around. So I've really been trying to explore styles that could, number one, keep my hair stretched, because when it's stretched, it doesn't like sort of get too compact to the point where the actual curls, like the actual shapes, are intertwining and then causing like tangles. So one, that could keep it stretched, and also two, that would be like low manipulation. So I know for a lot of people, these styles could look like buns, could look like puffs, could look like French braids, Dutch braids, could look like cornrows. Cornrows are really good. Um, but I personally try to like minimize having my hair just out. Like even if it's in a puff, I just found that in the past I'd still have to like detangle, and it was like still a whole thing. But then somehow I don't know why exactly, but lately the puff has been working out. The puff has been not too tangled, not too like, when it's too much time investment for the return. It's not been like that basically, and I think it's also got to do with, again, trying to create a process where the actual like motion of combing through the hair and like combing out the ends is minimized. And for me, that has somehow taken the shape of like doing either like 8 or 4 like braids or twists at night, and then in the morning like putting into a puff, not because I want to do the puff, but because putting like Dutch braids will just take too long, because I'm still again learning how to do that. So yeah, I think keeping like, again, the 4 braids or the 4 twists keep the stretch, and also keep the like, they keep the hair strands in the sort of arrangement that they would be in after detangling, so it's not allowing the hair strand to like take on a different arrangement, and then you try and like braid it and you have to like manipulate it way more. It's not like that. So yeah, that was one thing that I tried, and which could, I don't know, it could help you as well. But I would definitely recommend for winter getting a like protective style with extensions, because your end will not be exposed to like the cold and the atmosphere, and like again to like friction on different surfaces if your hair's like on your shoulders and everything. So yeah, that would definitely be my top tip. And I think in terms of like someone who's more so on the side of, okay, I've got my protective styling regimen down, but I'm in a situation where I've done my hair, like let's say at the very end of the winter break, like let's say, just using a random person, totally not me, in the like past 3 years. But let's say if you do your hair at the end of the winter break, right, while you're at home, and while you've got like, braiders galore everywhere, like you can just turn up and do your hair. You do it at the end, and then you come back here, but then you're kind of torn between, do I remove it or keep it in? Because if I keep it in, it's like, oh, I'm kind of like tired of it, or I need to detangle it or something like that. But if you remove it, it's like, what do I do now? Like, how do I replace the style? If, for example, if I'm someone who doesn't know about the braiders in St. Andrews or in Dundee, or if I'm someone who can't braid her own hair. So there's that sort of like the tension between those two options is, I think, something that's very, very recognizable to a lot of Black students. And I think if you're someone who's faced with that and is looking for maybe a tip on what to do, aside from like going on BRAIDAR to find a stylist that suits like what you're looking for, I would say definitely get in touch with your ACS, because they might also know some individuals who do braids, like that are within the student population. But even kind of outside of that, I think a lot of people who are in that boat and who kind of have like their own regimen going, their question might be around like, where do I get the products to kind of supplement that, or to like, if you take out a style, before you put the next style in, you might want to detangle it. So their question might be, where do I get the detangler? Where do I get the deep conditioner? Because a lot of international students know that if you put all your beauty products and all your like toiletries in your suitcase, the weight adds up very, very fast. So you have to kind of be judicious with what you're bringing and what you're leaving at home. So to that, I would say, just like contrary to popular belief, I think the local like drugstore, beauty, and like pharmacy type shops that you get in any sort of town or city, they're not specifically like black hair like beauty supply stores. I would say that they're surprising me with what they're putting out and what they've got on the shelves. Like even in St. Andrews, which is like a smaller sort of town, the Boots, for example, they've got a section which has got like Eco Styler, gel, black castor oil. They've got like Shea Moisture, and same for Superdrug as well. And so, there's I would say there's an extensive range to choose from, especially if you're someone who's like, oh, I don't want to use X like brand or X line. I'm not gonna say any names, but maybe you can like fill in the gaps with some formerly popular natural hair brands. But there is, there's something there if you're in a situation where you're like, look, I have to like, I can't do nothing. I have to actually like detangle the hair, otherwise I'm gonna have to like cut out the knots. Or if you're in a really desperate situation, there's stuff there for you, which is great. And also, I think outside of those hair care lines that are designated for like natural hair, for example, the pharmacies and like Boots type, Superdrug type shops, they've also got some pretty like surprising, products on offer that you wouldn't necessarily think could work for black hair. So, for example, like, I'm trying to think of a way to explain this without it seeming like a lot of work, because it really isn't. But what you the basis of how you can sort of identify those is like looking at the ingredients list. And normally, I know they use a lot of like scientific words and like fancy names and things, but the more you kind of try looking out for ingredients that look familiar, or that if you're, I guess, more like knowledgeable about what your hair likes, the more you can kind of recognize the like scientific name and sort of normal name of those ingredients, and you recognize them on the list, like the ingredients is to the back of a product, even if it's like some brand you've never heard of, or it's a brand that's like, oh, I thought like, that won't be that good. Giving those a shot, I think sometimes does really, really surprise you, especially nowadays that like the marketers and the people doing the formulations are more in tune to like, everybody's talking about moisture. Everybody's talking about like sort of whether if it's a protein conditioner, for example, like reconstructing, like repairing, those like things that can seem like buzzwords, but also do sometimes indicate a bit of like the actual content of the product. And yeah, this would be like regardless of hair type. I think these things like repairing, moisturizing, like different hair needs are sort of universal to all hair types. Sometimes like giving those a shot can surprise you. Then sometimes you're like, maybe maybe this was a bit of marketing, pixie dust after all. But yeah, I would say if you've got a conditioner, for example, at home that works, like, always works for you, is your go-to and everything, take a look at the ingredients list, like whether that's online or there's this website called INCI Decoder, or INCI, like all capitals, then Decoder. It basically breaks down what different ingredients do, and I guess more usefully for this tip, it actually has ingredients lists. So if you can kind of get a hold of that for your go-to product, you can compare that list against products that are like available to you in these like pharmacies and things. And I've actually found a lot of success doing that recently because again, I just think I think it's quite heavy to bring a lot of my stuff from Lagos, for example, and also sometimes you can get them for cheaper here, but that's a whole other tip. That's a whole other like product hunting strategy like masterclass that I would have to do to get into that. But basically, just doing a little bit of cross referencing can go a long way to finding products that can work for you in the interim, even if you're like, it's not as good. Well, at least it's like your hair didn't completely dry out this whole semester, or at least like you didn't have to rip your hair out when you're like trying to um, comb it or something like that in terms of, when you have braids and you remove the braids and you have to comb out all those knots I was talking about. Otherwise, if you shampoo it, those knots are going to be like something else. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of like, it's better than having to deal with that. So yeah, I hope that can really sort of provide maybe some inspiration, maybe some like encouragement to any students who might be facing those challenges in a new like environment, might not be sure like what exactly to try out or where exactly to start even. And yeah, I guess in a wider sense, I also hope that BRAIDAR can be a similar sort of source of comfort and a source of like reassurance for people, especially because like as I said in the very first episode of BRAIDAR, the Business of Beauty, people shouldn't have to choose between going to a really like a university that they love the course, they love everything about it, or like a university where they've gotten like, that is really like reputable and everything like that, and that could really set them up for the career that they want or the future that they want. They shouldn't have to choose between that and like living comfortably, or like even just looking and like being able to present themselves in a way that instills them with confidence and instills them with a sense of like, identity, connection to culture, and just being able to, I don't know, just get that kind of that that feeling of happiness when you get a new hairstyle. I don't think people should have to choose between that. And yeah, anything we can do to kind of lessen the barriers of like students of color coming to different universities all across like the UK and other like countries as well, especially predominantly white universities. The more of these little barriers that might seem small, might seem like mundane, we can remove, then the better the experience for people that do come here. And then people will actually be able to like say to anyone who might ask for like a recommendation, let's say like younger siblings or cousins or people that they know from their old school, they might be able the people who are here who are like, let's say for example black students, they'll be able to say, yeah, I can recommend this university for you because I can say with some surety that you've got some like infrastructure there in place that will stop you from feeling like, what have I gotten myself into? Or, that will make you feel part of a community, that will kind of reassure you that there is a sort of tangible presence of like, be it black students, be it BAME students, like in the town or the city. So yeah, that's just one small way that we can kind of like gradually in the long term increase the um, like diversity of different institutions, and hopefully, yeah, just increase the satisfaction levels of all students. So yeah, as always, it's been a really great episode just chatting with you guys, and thank you for tuning in. It was really nice to bring in a bit of literature as well, because as some of you might know, I'm doing joint English and management, so I like to bridge the two, business, books, that type of thing. I might actually do a series in the future called The Business of Books, because that would be really fun. I've got some like publishing sort of opinions I'd like to share, some like really out there thoughts that are basically, they're not tied to BRAIDAR, so they have to be something separate. But if you're interested in that, again, don't hesitate to like reach out. We can definitely chat about that in the future. And so, yeah, I will be here next week, 3 p.m., GMT. So if you're listening from Nigeria, for example, that's 4 p.m., at least for a while, until we change the clocks. But yeah, hope you have a great rest of the weekend, and I will see you then.